Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation about our return to school. The purpose of this presentation is to go nuts and bolts through everything that students need to know and parents and guardians need to know for our return to school on Monday. So the way this is going to work is I have some pre-prepared slides, hopefully anticipating all of the topics that will be helpful to hear about. About halfway through, I'll stop around 20 slides in to see if there are any questions relative to what has been covered so far. So you may want to reserve your questions until then. And then at the halfway point, after we do that, go through the rest of the slides as well. This recorded presentation will be made available, and the links embedded in the presentation will be available online. The slideshow that I'm using, if you want to revisit it without watching the video, will also be available. So thank you for joining us today, and hope you'll find this very helpful. So I just want to have us all stop and breathe for a second, because the focus on back to school, rightly so, has been around all of the logistics and procedures and preparation for learning under the restrictions due to COVID-19. Those things are very important because health and safety is a priority. But I have our mission up just to remind all of us that we are still here with students at Shawsheen for the same purpose, to fulfill this mission. And we are able to work toward this mission with the parameters that are currently in place, or the restrictions might be a better way to put it. And it might look a little different day to day on how we go about achieving it. You know, students at home for academics, shop spaces modified a little bit differently, but the educators here at Shawsheen are still here for the same reason, which is to work toward this mission. And I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone here, been in the building the past 10 school days, getting lessons ready, putting Microsoft Teams classes together, modifying shop spaces. It has been an all hands on deck experience. It will continue to be. And thank you to students and families at home for being patient during this time when students would normally be in school. So at the end of the day, yes, we're talking a lot about COVID-19 stuff, but our mission with students is still at the forefront of what we do. All right, so first two things I want to make you aware of, because much of this presentation will follow some things relative to the handbook. So students will receive an agenda book, a hard copy like they already do. Those have already gone to print. But the electronic version, which I have linked here under number 1, the 2020-2021 student handbook, is the most up-to-date version. It has an updated school calendar and revisions to a few sections. But what it doesn't include is all of the changes relative to COVID-19, because those have just been finalized, over the past few weeks with the latest guidance. So item 2 is the supplement to the student handbook. And so you can access that at that link as well. It'll be on the principal's page of the website, and we can send that out, page out with all these links in addition to this presentation. But what students and families need to know is that everything in the full handbook still applies, because most things haven't changed. And anything in the supplement is on top of that, or noting small changes to things. And most of those changes will be hit upon in this presentation. So just want to make sure everyone's aware. And obviously information is subject to change as the situation changes in Massachusetts. And so any of those changes will be communicated if they happen. I'm not going to open those documents now. You'll look through those. Students will bring home the sign-off sheets on them like they typically do. But if you're already familiar with our student handbook, great. I would encourage everyone to make sure they read the supplement as well. So one of the first things we're going to talk about today, and I know it's been mentioned before, but I want to start with a couple slides just about all our health and safety expectations. So this list was in our reopening plan, and it's also in the handbook supplement, and it's about before you leave the house. This is one of the most important things you can do to stay safe. And I want to explain this checklist a little to make sure we're all interpreting it correctly. So if students are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, and the potential symptoms are listed here, the best thing we can do to keep people safe is not send those students to school. And so if you have are experiencing symptoms on this list, or your child is, and you know what they are. Like, so for instance, I can use myself as an example. I always get like some sinus issues this time of year, right? So I've been having some stuff going on with my head and my nose that I know every year at this time it's sinus issues, totally replicates that. Then you don't have to be concerned if your child has allergies at a certain time of year and it looks like that. But if your child wakes up with a 102-degree fever, if your child suddenly has this dry cough and a sore throat and you have no other explanation, because those are COVID symptoms, we don't want to risk it. And on here, it says that they must get a positive test before re-entering school after these symptoms. If you don't want to do the test, then the student would have to quarantine for the 14 days after the students go away. And to help with that, on this next page, there are links. There's a link here to the actual protocols that have to be followed. And I'm going to open this up here. And so on your screen, and the slideshow will take you to this link. It gives you a sense, if an individual is symptomatic, what to do. So if an individual is symptomatic, and they take a test and it's negative, they can return to school 24 hours after. An individual is symptomatic, takes a test and is positive. It tells what they have to do in terms of isolation and staying home for at least 10 days and so on. I'm not going to read all this to you because I know that you can read through. And then if an individual is not tested, and I apologize, I misspoke a moment ago, they have to isolate for 10 days and then return once asymptomatic for 24 hours. So that is if your child wakes up one day, shows these symptoms, this would be the process. So if you don't want to have them get tested, there is a non-tested option. If a student is exposed to a COVID-19 individual, it also explains this process as well, that you can read through in terms of what they would have to do. And I'm going to return to the slideshow regarding a couple bullets about that. So just so that you know, so if your child were to be exposed to a COVID confirmed case, someone with COVID, and that were to happen outside of school, they would be notified by the Board of Health. We would be notified as well. And then we would do contact tracing internally to identify other students that would have been in the proximity. And so in terms of our internal contact tracing, if your student is exposed to a confirmed case in the school, we would let you know and say, your child meets the terms outlined on that chart by being in this proximity for this amount of time, and we would let you know. What we wouldn't do in any instance is share who the person was exposed to. That obviously is protected information. So we're certainly hoping that all the parameters we have in place will prevent this situation, but I know there were some questions about this chart on the previous slide, just in terms of when to stay home. So hopefully this provides clarification, especially if you don't want your child to get tested, and when to be concerned about symptoms or not. And you can always link back to these protocols with this slide if you'd like to in the future. So hopefully by now these health and safety requirements seem redundant to hear, but they are the most important ways that we can prevent transmission. And this is really important for two reasons. One, we do not want anyone in the school community to fall ill at any time. And also, if we can prevent transmission, we can stay open for longer. And we want students to be in person for as long as it's safe to do so. So top things, and boards of health agree with this, masks and face coverings must be worn over mouth and nose at all times. Can't have the nose hanging out. I know it's a popular look, but everything needs to be covered. And that has to happen, as soon as students exit their vehicles in the parking lot, to as soon as they get back in them at the end of the day. For students taking buses, they need to be on before they get on the bus. And the exceptions are, during lunch, when drinking water in designated areas, or if applicable, if a student experiences a mask break. The second piece is washing and sanitizing hands frequently, when students come in the building, before and after eating or drinking, or removing their mask or face covering when entering and exiting rooms. Students, when you come in the building, you will find at our entrances, we have these touchless hand sanitizers, We have them in the shops, in the gym, in the caf, all the shared places that you'll go, in some of the hallways. And so obviously washing is preferred whenever possible, but hand sanitizing stations are multiple locations. Physical distancing is the next piece, 3-foot minimum at all times, 6 feet whenever eating or drinking. And we have students will be eating in the caf and the gym, and we have seats spaced out by 6 feet in all directions. We will put assigned seating where applicable. You know, in some shops where students tend to be seated more, it will be possible to assign seating. In some shops where students are using different pieces of equipment, that's obviously not possible. But staff in those areas will direct students about movement within the shops to minimize students, you know, getting within that distance as much as possible. Following hallway signage, we have arrows and one way and do not enter signs that students will see in the building, and so we ask that you respect that at all times. And obviously, and I know this is counterintuitive to folks who haven't seen each other in a long time, but no congregating anywhere in groups, whether it's, you know, on the patio, in the bathroom, no hugs or anything of that nature. We just can't be doing that. And then the final piece here, obviously in some environments, we have shared tools, equipments, and desks. And so all shops will be sanitized at the end of every day. So those will be cleaned. Classrooms with multiple cohorts of students, the limited amount, those will be cleaned as well. But some shops have some big pieces of equipment and tools that we just would never have enough for each student. And so there will be sanitizing products for students to wipe down before and after each use, so that there's a double wipe in between to make sure everyone is safe. And all that, those supplies will be provided by the school, or in alignment with the guidance for the cleaning supplies we're supposed to have. So we're going to be enforcing these things pretty seriously, and just ask students in advance to be ready to adhere to these things so that we can keep you in the building for as long as possible. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit now. So we talked about some health and safety piece. I want to talk about the first week of school, the schedules, how you're going to log into your classes remotely next week. So that's what's coming up here. So our first week of school is starting on a week 2, and our week 1 and week 2 is based on who's in shop versus academic each week. So I know it might seem strange that we're starting in a week 2. It's actually something we have done in the past. And that was intentional because since 9th graders don't have logins or any context to the building, week 2 is when they are in shop. So we want them in the building the first week of school. So you will see on the left side of the screen, it tells you a week 2 schedule. Next week, the 14th through 18th, is a week 2 schedule. So 10th and 12th graders, you will be at home logging into your academic classes remotely using Microsoft Teams. In a few slides, there'll be instructions on how to do that. Grades 9 and 11, you will report to the building for shop week, and you're going to attend those shops in person. And then we'll flip on September 21st to 25th, the second week of school. That is a week 1 schedule. Students will remain home, and they will log into academic classes remotely using Microsoft Teams, and you will be able to see those instructions shortly as well. And then grade 10 and 12 will come into the building that week for shop week. And then the weeks will start to rotate. The school calendar has the weeks designated throughout the year. The one exception here is, so obviously any senior approved to be out on co-op on week 1s, they will go to co-op, except the first week 1 Monday. So Monday, September 21st, all seniors have to report. We need to get you your books from your teachers and all those other things. And then the second day, you can start reporting to co-op. So bus transportation information, we know this is a big question. If it's not up already, by the end of the day, I've been told the bus schedules will be up at this link on the website. There will also be information being sent out to families about buses, but I have some bullet points here covering that bus transportation information. So as we have shared before, buses are at 1/3 of capacity at 21 to 23 students per bus, and that cannot be changed. And so buses will start on their route. They will pick up students starting with the first stop until the bus is full. If the bus fills up before a route is finished, the bus driver will come to school, drop off those students, disinfect the bus, and then finish the route. Even with the surveys out and everything, it is impossible to predict which buses will fill, which buses won't. So anticipate that this might happen on Monday morning. If another bus from another route drives by a stop where students couldn't be picked up and that bus has space, it will stop for those students. So students should note they may not always take their same bus number in the morning if that happens, but buses will be labeled on the sides, either A&F Bus Company or Christensen Bus Company, and they will have signs in the window that say Shawsheen Tech as well, so you know it's a safe bus to get on. And anticipate that bus locations may have changed from previous years, so you can see that when you look at the bus schedules. So this will be something that we're going to have to assess as we go. I'm going to hammer home the point that I know Dr. Jackson has made in the past. If it is possible for a student to get to school some way other than bus, that will be helpful because we know some students do not have options. So if there is a way for you to drop your child off and that is feasible, or pick your child up, even if you're only able to do one or the other, that will help a lot. And then if we find that, the double route thing is a big issue and we have to revisit logistics, we certainly will, but we can't predict where it'll go at this point. So we ask for your understanding and patience as we evaluate that as we go. And that's going to be really the name of the game with all of the logistics this year. The way we are operating the school is something we've never had to do in this way. And we are committed as an admin team and as a school to continually assessing and adjusting as needed. So I want to talk a little bit about morning drop-off and student entry, and then this next slide will talk about student dismissal and afternoon pickup. So I'm going to pull up a chart in a second that you'll be able to, on your own time, look at more at your leisure. But basically, students will be dropped off at different locations around the building and enter different doors based on where they're going for first period that day, which in most cases is the shop. So students who are on buses will be the only people allowed in the building before 7:25 because there's just nowhere to put students until 7:25 when teachers are in place. And so buses may drop off starting as early as 7 a.m. We will have staff in the gym and the cafeteria to oversee those students. Since they won't be eating at that time, we can fit more students in both areas during those times because they don't have to be 6 feet apart. And that's where students will go until 7:25, where they will report in lieu of a traditional homeroom. They will just go to their first period. First period won't begin until 7:50, but that homeroom block will be in the same place as your first period shop or class, just to eliminate another passing time during the day. So students who are either getting dropped off or driving to school are expected to arrive between 7:25 and 7:45. And a student will be considered tardy if they arrive to their first period shop or class after 7:50. So they will be considered tardy for the day. And first period will begin promptly at 7:51 a.m. And obviously right now I'm talking about the in-school weeks for students. We will talk about the schedule for remote students in a moment. And so I'm going to click into this student drop-off guide that will be available for you to view. Oops. One second here. All right, here we go. So the top of this sheet explains what I was just talking about. But what you can do for morning dropout is first determine in the left-hand column the mode of transportation. So like I said, if your student is taking a bus, they will get dropped off at location A. At the bottom of this document, there's a map with the drop-off locations, and they will all enter through the cafeteria doors, and they will be directed by staff into the cafeteria or the gym in an orderly manner, and they're the only students allowed in before 7:25. And I've just been given feedback that my chart is not showing, so give me 1 minute and I will get that up for you. right. Thank you for your patience there, folks, as we got that up. So on this document again, so the yellow at the top, if you're taking a bus, you'll follow this, you'll get dropped off at location A, and then students who arrive by bus, as I said, can go in the CAF and gym before 7:25. They'll all go in the CAF entrance. Staff will be there to manage that. Then you decide, is a student driving themselves, and they'll look in the blue area, or is the student being dropped off, and you'll look in the green area. So I'm going to first talk about, and I'm not going to go through every example, but if a student has a parking pass and is driving, the student will go to the blue. Then in the second column, identify where they're going that day. So for instance, if the student is going to business tech, we can see this in the first group here. In the third column, they're not being dropped off, so all these students are going to park. And then to the right, it says, where is the student entering? So, you know, I'm in business tech, I'm in a park, I'm going to then enter the school through the entrance to the gym hallway. Versus, let's look down a little bit, I'm in electrical, so that's the 4th row down in the blue area. I'm going to park in my assigned space, and then I'm actually going to enter electrical through the exterior door to my shop. So students who are driving themselves look up their shop, they're parking their assigned space, and then they're entering the school through where it denotes in the far right column. Then for students who are being dropped off, similarly, you're going to look in the second column. Where is the student going that day? So for example, I'm going to say I'm going to dental assisting. Where is the student being dropped off? So in a moment, I'll show you these locations. It's A through E, but this says location C, which is the side parking lot between cosmetology and life sciences. It's the one where there's like a little loop that you can drive around. They'll get dropped off in that loop, and then they will go in through the entrance to the life science wing. Whereas, you know, let's look at a student in automotive. They'll get dropped. There's a side parking lot next to the automotive cage. They'll get dropped off in that lot. And then they will go through the exterior door to the automotive shop. So any student going in through exterior shop doors can only go through their own shop, right? So if I'm an automotive student, I have to go through the automotive exterior door. I can't go through like the metal fab exterior door. And so you can use this to look up for your individual students. Again, this will be shared with you. It's in this presentation, but a little map if you're unsure of the descriptions of the drop-off locations and to orient you with it. Location A here is in the rear of the school. That's where the cafeteria patio is. That's where buses and a couple shops will be dropped off as it shows in the chart. Area B is the front, the main entrance to the school. Area C is by the entrance by Alexander Road, where you drive down the hill, and then there's a loop you can drive around and drop your student off. Area D is behind the school. So in the morning, you know, buses pull up in the first row in front of the school, and then in between parking spots, students can be dropped off. So that's Area D. And then Area E, when you enter the rear of the school by Cook Street, right before you drive by the automotive cage, there's a side parking lot you can pull into. You can pull in there, drop your student off, and then exit. So I'm going to close out this document for now, but this will be shared with everyone to review for the case-by-case with their own student. And I'm going to return to our slideshow now. All right, so now you can, on that same document, on the final page is the information that is on this slide. So for afternoon dismissal and student pickup, the way we're structuring this is staggered slightly in an attempt to alleviate traffic concerns, because as those of you who picked up students in the past know, it can get a little hectic here at student pickup time. And also to control the number of students passing through the halls at once. If we dismiss every student at 2:04, that's every student in the hallway at once, every student flooding into the parking lot. So at 2 p.m., all students who are being picked up will be dismissed. The idea behind that is that people picking up students will be like pulling in between parked cars, and we need them out of the lots before the buses and students who are driving release. So 2 p.m., students who are being picked up will be dismissed. Students will exit the building in the same locations they entered. So if you're in automotive, you entered by the automotive exterior door, you're going to leave the building through that door, and students can be picked up in the same locations. At 2:03, students who drove themselves to school will be dismissed. So try and get them out before buses go. And then 2:04, students who take the bus will be dismissed. So that is the staggered dismissal schedule. And again, that is also, that'll stay in the slideshow. It'll be in that document I'm going to share. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the daily schedule. So for the in-school week, students will remain in their shops all day, and they will leave to report to assigned lunches, which will be in the cafeteria or gym, as I've mentioned. And a few students, it's a much smaller group who have been invited to report to school for academics. All of those students will go to first lunch, and then they will go to periods 5B or 6B. And actually, the next slide I show you speaks more to what their schedule will look like. So on this page for students in shop or students who are in the building, you will arrive and go starting at 7:25 to your first period classes, which is where essentially your homeroom will be. And you need to be there by 7:50 when attendance will be taken, and then period 1 will begin. And then the bell schedule is the same as it typically is, okay? And then students in shop will be assigned, they'll find out by Monday what their lunch is during shop week, and they will leave shop to go one of these lunches. And normally we like dismiss from lunch and classes at the same time to switch between lunches, and we've added 2 minutes buffer in between, so that to reduce the amount of students passing by each other to go to and from lunch. So this is the daily schedule for remote and at-home weeks. So all students will be scheduled for first lunch while working remotely from home during academic weeks. And actually all students in academics, even those who are in the building, will always have first lunch, unless for some reason we find we need to change it, but that's how we're starting out. Students connecting remotely don't need to log in during that homeroom time, but they do need to be logged into period 1 by 7:50. And then they will follow this chart. You can see in here, they have lunch from 10:43 to 11:04. And then they will go to 5B and 6B for their 5th and 6th period classes. And then in terms of students who work remotely from home, because on vocational week, because they have opted for 100% remote instruction, that will be sort of on a case-by-case basis, and we'll talk, that's only about 24 students who have opted for 100% remote. We'll talk about those schedules in a later slide, so it's going to be very case-by-case. So now that you've sort of seen the schedule, I'm going to revisit how to check schedules in Aspen, and then we're going to show students how to determine their first exploratory cycle, and then how you get into Microsoft Teams during your remote weeks. So some emails went out yesterday. Student schedules can be viewed in Aspen. Parents and guardians of 9th grade students have been sent emails with login credentials for their Aspen accounts. 9th grade students will receive them next week when they're in school. Parents of 10th and 12th grade students, your same login credentials work. That's why you didn't get sent new ones. Same with grades 10 through 12. Your same credentials should work. To view your child's schedule in Aspen, same as what was sent home yesterday, you select the family top tab, your child's name, the schedule tab to the left, and then a matrix view of the schedule will pull up. And if you want to view it in list view, there is a link for that. And if you're having trouble with Aspen, an email went out with this information today. It'll also be in the slide, which you can access. We'll ask you to submit a ticket at our Sherpa help desk. The link is there. And this tells you how to go about it, the step-by-step instructions of what you need to enter those tickets. So if you're in trouble, I would get those in, definitely tonight. So hopefully someone can get back to you tomorrow so that you can get in there. I should correct. I think that email today went out to 9th grade parents, just because they were the ones having issues getting their logon credentials. But any parent can or student can use this help desk if that will be useful to you. So I mentioned this yesterday in the communication home, but I thought a visual might be helpful. So when you pull up your student schedule, if you then click the list view link, you get the list of all the courses. And all exploratory shops are listed as an 8,000 level course. I'm pointing at the screen as if you can see what I'm pointing at right now. Are listed as an 8,000 level course, and the term code begins with an X, and then it has a number. So XO1 is exploratory cycle number 1, XO2 is cycle number 2, and so on. So this student schedule that I brought up, I can see that cycle 1, this student is going to plumbing. And then if I want to look ahead, cycle 2 is automotive, and so on. I imagine that 9th graders are thinking, well, that's great that I'm going to plumbing, but where is plumbing? So how to find your shop on your first day. So the first thing is we're going to have staff at all entrances. So when you enter the building, ask them where to go. We'll have some maps available. We have some big signs at all the major intersections with arrows to the directions for the shop. But even on years when we're able to do an in-person 9th grade orientation, almost every 9th grader when they come in the building, it's like, where do I go? Because you don't remember a building that you've seen, maybe once. So please don't be afraid to ask. No one is going to be rude to you. Everyone is really sensitive to how stressful this is. And don't stress 9th graders about finding the correct entrance on day 1. So if you were looking at that drop-off chart and it says, all right, I'm in plumbing, I need to go to the exterior door, and you're like, oh my God, where's the exterior door to plumbing? Get dropped off at the CAF entrance, get dropped off at the main door if that's something you're unsure of, and then ask where to go. There'll be signs, you can still ask where to go. So I don't want anyone losing sleep this weekend over not knowing exactly which door to enter. Upperclassmen, I expect that you know where the exterior doors to your shop are, so I'm confident that you can figure that out. But 9th graders, please don't let that be a stressor for you. And so hopefully that's helpful about finding your shop on the first day. And then what to wear and bring to exploratory. The exploratory process, I think, is a very exciting one. I wish I had had an opportunity like this in high school. One of the best things that we do in vocational education is just help build students' career awareness and interests. And a great part of the exploratory process is you'll probably learn more about yourself and what things you like and don't like. I talked to a student once who had thought they wanted to enter a health field and then realized, I don't really like working like individually with people at all. And I'm not interested in patient care. And that's as important as finding out what you do like, right? Nothing bad about the health field. It's excellent. It's just an example that came to mind. But make sure that when you come in, you're open to those different experiences. You have a positive attitude, whether it was a shop at the top of your list or the bottom, and be willing to try something new. Because all of this is going to help build you into more informed individual when making decisions about your future pathways. And please use the link provided here about the requirements for what to wear and bring for 9th grade exploratory. Students will be provided with their first pair of safety glasses, so you don't need to worry about that. But just like for everything else, students do need to show up with a mask. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears one more time. I know this is a big question, which is about, especially for the 10th and 12th graders who are starting from home on Monday, how do I get into my classes? So we have 2 slides about this, and I have 2 embedded videos for you to watch. So just to repeat, grades 10 and 12 must be in all their remote classes, starting with period 1 at 7:50 this coming Monday. That is the expectation. For each class, I'm going to show you photos of this in a second. Students will have individual invites to those classes that show up on their calendars in Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Teams. And so students will have to be signed into their 365 accounts to look at their calendars. And then I'll show you in the next slide, once you're in there, the invite will be there and you can just join your class. So one of our instructional technologists, Mr. Greg Bendel, has created 2 videos to help guide students through this process. I'm not going to stream these videos now. I'm going to ask people to do that in their own time. I'm going to say that students must watch these videos and log into their accounts before Monday morning to ensure they can log in their first period classes on time. If you suddenly reach out to the school at 7:49 or 7:41 or even 7:30 on Monday, and they're like, I can't log in, the turnaround to getting back to students, if there's a flood of you, isn't going to be immediate and you're going to miss class. And on Monday, I'm going to be streaming at 8 o'clock an orientation video to all students about being back in school. And so you're going to want to make sure you're on time for that as well. And so these 2 videos, the first one is just 7 minutes long. It's a complete overview of how to log into the Microsoft portal, how to access the different apps, and you need to be logged in before you can use Teams. So I would definitely watch this start to finish. Then there's a 4-minute overview of how to access your class and use Microsoft Teams. And that's really important as well. It even gets into like, how do you turn your video on? How do you mute yourself? How do you send a question? And so students should definitely be watching that as well. And this next slide is a shortcut. Before I show it to you, it's not in lieu of the videos, but it's a quick reference shortcut to come back to. So just a quick overview after you've watched the video, quick cheat sheet for getting into your Microsoft Teams classes. So when you open Microsoft Teams, you're going to want to click on this calendar tab that's on the side, and then your calendar is going to show up. Oops. And then you want to make sure that you're on the right week. And so this is, I created fake classes for myself because I'm not assigned any classes on Monday. But students will see something like this. So all their double block classes will have, invites, periods 1 and 2. There's an invite, period 3 and 5, period 5 and 6, period 7, period 8, whatever the student's class looks like. The title of the class and the teacher's name will be involved. But then when you click on one of those calendar events, there'll be a button that says join. And you hit that button join and you'll be able to join your Microsoft team. But there's a little more to the whole experience. Again, this is just a cheat sheet, so definitely watch that 4-minute video. So now that we've talked about how to connect to your remote courses, this is all in the student handbook supplement. The full details are in that supplement, so you still are expected to read that. But just some quick bullets here. So as we've said before, students will engage in synchronous and asynchronous learning activities and are expected to participate and will receive grades. And right now I'm specifically talking about remote learning for academics. The few students doing remote vocational, again, I'll talk about in a later slide. All school rules still apply regarding conduct, attendance, dress code, everything of that nature. There's no deviation from expectations for behavior. And students will be expected to log in on time, like you're expected to be at class on time, and to report to all their classes that day. Students must be available by both audio and video the entire class period. And this does not mean that you will necessarily be talking the whole class period or listening to a lecture the whole class period. It'll be synchronous much of the time, which means you will be zoomed in while the teacher is teaching. But there will be other times when the teacher maybe says, hey, you have this independent assignment. I'm here if you need help, go work on this, do what you need to do. It won't be, 80 minutes a lecture per double block class. Just in terms of some expectations for students while they're connected during these video sessions. So the camera should be facing the student, shouldn't be like up at the ceiling or at the dog off in the corner. Students shouldn't be like up walking around to the fridge with their cameras on. Students should be in a workspace area that's an appropriate location, such as a desk or a table. We can't have students like laying in bed, connected to their Microsoft team. And when you get into Microsoft Teams, there's an option to select your own a background. So if you don't want people to see like the wall of your dining room, for example, you can put a background up that is like a fake office background or something of that nature. Students should be dressed appropriately for school, so the dress code should not be broken during these video sessions. And the microphone should be defaulted to mute, but then turn yourself on when you're participating or asking questions. And that's just because if 20 people for anyone who's been in these conference meetings over the past couple of months, have their mute button off all at once, like the feedback and the extra sound can really drone out anyone who's speaking. The last 2 points are very important. Just the biggest piece is student privacy in all of this, because in a regular classroom we can really control student privacy, but in a remote environment there are extra things to consider. So the first is that students are expected to comply with all school rules regarding audio and video recordings. So specifically, they may not audio or video record any part of a remote learning session without the knowledge and permission from the teachers and all participants, which it's very unlikely there's going to be a reason for that. So for instance, if you got your camera off in the corner and you're recording the session, you're breaking this rule. Students have a certain level of privacy in these sessions. Just like in a classroom, your other peers can hear and see what you say, but we don't broadcast that for other people. And that expectation will be here as well. And just like in the handbook, there will be disciplinary consequences for anyone who takes or distributes those recordings. So just don't do it, please. There may be times when a teacher records part of a lesson to post for students, but that will be posted in a way that only students in the class can access it. So again, not putting it out to a wider audience. The second piece is where I need, family members or anyone in the home environment during the day to also be aware. So when students are in the session, no one else around should be listening in or watching. Because again, student privacy. In the classroom, students wouldn't have like people's family members or other people in the home there in the class seeing them and hearing what they're saying. So if students are in a home environment where other people are doing remote work as well, which I anticipate will be the case in many homes, and people are within earshot, students should be wearing headphones during those sessions. So only people enrolled in those sessions should be involved in experiencing the audio and video that is happening. So I just thank everyone in advance for complying with that. It's not only important for student privacy and safety, but also student comfort, so that they know there aren't unknown people listening in on what they're saying during class. All right, so I'm going to pause for a moment. That was probably definitely the heavier part of the presentation, but I'm going to see if any questions have come up. Just give me a moment while I transfer my screen here to look at some questions. And if you have some at this point that relate to what's been covered so far, because you may have questions about athletics or other things that'll come up in the second half, anything that's happened so far. So students will get their IDs while they are in school, and a slide is coming up about IDs. So if someone has a sibling or knows someone who's experiencing symptoms, do they have to stay home? So no, per the protocols we have, the people who have to stay home are people who are symptomatic, people who have been exposed to a confirmed case. So if a student's sibling has a confirmed case of COVID, then yes, they would have to follow those protocols and stay home, but otherwise, no. So if you have to pick up 2 freshmen in different shops, that's a great question. Understandably, that'll happen with some families. So in these few cases, we can make an exception. So let's say you have 2 students in 2 different places. Confer with your students about where it makes the most sense based on them to leave the building and for you to pick them up. And that won't be an issue, because that'll just be a handful of folks who would have to do that. But that's an excellent question. Thank you. A student who is walking home will dismiss with the buses. That's a great question. It's good to know some students still walk to and from school. So similar, what are you supposed to do if you're dropping off multiple children in different shops? You can certainly just drop them in one location. You can choose which one makes the most sense based on your students. If it's too much trouble to drive around, which I could totally see, because again, it's going to be a small group where there's siblings that we have that scenario. As long as everyone else is following the protocols, that won't be an issue. So thank you. Oh, great question. I believe this is from a student. How will lunch seating work? Excellent. So in the gymnasium, we have a combination of desks and tables that are all spaced out by 6 feet in every direction. In the cafeteria, we have the same cafeteria tables, except we got rid of the round tables because only one person can sit safely each of those, and there are more large rectangle tables. And there's actually stickers on the table that says that you can sit here. So students during lunches can only sit where the stickers are. Other times the day that we use the CAF, when students will have masks on, students can sit at every other seat, but during lunches, they can only sit where the stickers are. All right. So if the buses are too full in the afternoon, then we'll have to do the same thing as the morning, where we'd have to do a second run. Thank you. That's a great question. So can I go over the door situation again? So I'll briefly summarize it, and then I'll make that that handout is available to everyone through this presentation when it posts, and I'll send out the link. But the door situation is just, based on, you find the mode of transportation, the students shop, and then you look up which door of the building that they're supposed to access. And if you have any further questions about that or concerns, you can certainly reach out to us if you feel like there's an outstanding situation for your child that you wouldn't want to get into here. So how will gym class be set up and how it will work? So through the physical education department, students do a mix of phys ed and health depending on the semester. And so that will all be done remotely through your teachers, and you'll log into those sessions and your teachers will explain that to you next week. So that will still remain an academic week. So if your sons have the same lunch, can they sit together? So we're gonna assign lunches by shop and assign shops to certain areas. It'll be assigned by grade as well. So I think if they ended up being in the same shop, they might end up at the same table, but we still have to adhere to where the stickers are, because if we allow, two siblings to sit next to each other, it then offsets all the seats, right? Because then they'd be more than 6 feet to another student. So we're still going to have them sit where the stickers are at lunch. So students can take a bathroom break during class. There's a slide on bathrooms actually coming up, so I'm going to hold off on that question. So a couple of these questions are coming up, so I'm not going to enter that. So we answer those quite yet. What is Internet Explorer called, and what is the entrance? It is called ISSN/programming and web on that chart. So if a student is being dismissed, yes, you can go to the main office, and the main office on that chart is location B. So you can come to the main office for dismissals. I'm just working through questions as I'm pausing for a minute here. So if a student was recommended for in-school academics and they are going to be doing that, on that chart, it actually lists academic classes and tells you which entrance to go if you're there for an academic week. So when you look at that chart again, you'll see that. Great question. So a question was asked about lockers in the hallways not being used. That's something that if there are students who have extenuating circumstances, we can reassess. Shop lockers may be used under rules set out by the shop instructors. but students shouldn't be bringing backpacks with like their books and stuff for academic week during shop week. So is security different because windows and doors will be open more? So windows, we've never had like a rule about not opening windows. Doors will be open, multiple doors will be open at the start of day, but there will be staff at all of them. But then once the school day starts, those doors will close and they'll be locked. If a student is working privately in a room, do they need to wear headphones? No. If there's no one who can overhear or see the other students, they don't need. Where can we find this presentation to review in more detail? I will be posting the link on the website and sending it out as well, in addition to making the presentation available. So how will a bus driver driving by when it's not their route, who may be picking up extra students, know the kids are for the tech and not the high school? All the bus drivers, regardless of route, have and know all the routes, and we don't have the same routes as other schools, so that's how they'll be able to distinguish. So can I go near my friend that I already saw? No, you cannot. So students, because students might be interacting with a lot of kids out of school, and then if we allow everyone in to interact with who they are out of school, we'd be out of compliance with the rules from the state, so unfortunately, no. The library is not going to be available to go to during lunch. There's only going to be food allowed during the in the caf in the gym. Yeah, so someone asked, some classes are in CC office and J office, where are those located? So some teachers are teaching their like related courses or other courses from an office in the building, but because you'll be connecting remotely, you don't need to worry about where that is. So are Microsoft desktop apps required for class? No, if you watch the 7-minute video, it shows how to access all Microsoft products in a web browser, so you don't have to download anything. How would a remote student pick up books they need for school? We will be reaching out to those families to schedule times for that. So what would happen if a student missed the bus home and a parent, we're going to be talking about after school momentarily, so I will get to that question. So the bus schedule, I believe, is up on the website now, but if not, I've been told it will be at some point today, but I believe that it is already up on the website. So if the bus is full and they have to go back for students, those students won't be marked tardy because it's not their fault that the bus couldn't fit them. So that you don't have to worry about that. And I apologize for the pause. I'm just going through the questions. Y'all are thinking similar things. A lot of similar questions came through. So what can be brought for lunch and what should it be in? There's no rules about what students can bring for lunch. We don't have any like food restrictions. So if you have to use the bathroom during online, just similar to an in-school class, just let your teacher know, and that you can use the chat function for that. Yeah, so how will I know which bus number to take home in the afternoon? If you're going home to the same stop, it would be the same one from the morning. So 9th graders will get their Aspen and team login information sometime next week. We are taking students out of shop 2 hours at a time, different groups each day. So by the end of next week, all 9th graders will have that. And by the end of next week, 9th and 11th graders will be given any books they need for their academic classes, and then the following week we're going to do that for 10th and 12th graders while they're in the building. Students may not go to their personal vehicles to eat. So if your shop doesn't have an outside door, if you look back at that document that I'll be sharing out, it tells you which entrance to use for your shop. So I think a lot of these questions are starting to get at things that come up later in the slides as I'm looking through. So I'm actually going to continue with the presentation at this point and then revisit any questions that are left. So let's continue that here. Thank you everyone for bringing your questions forward. So although this is a smaller group of students, I want to quickly touch on what's going to happen for students who were recommended for and accepted 100% in-school learning. And again, we identified students based on high needs as using the criteria outlined from the Department of Education. So that small percentage of students will be reporting for in-school learning on both academic and shop weeks. We will be getting more details and information out to these families tomorrow. But general overview, so during academic weeks, these students will report to teachers' classrooms for any support services level courses. Those are 9,000 level courses that they are required to be in for their IEP. They'll also be able to get other services that week. So they will be in person with their teachers. Because most of the students that we have in, a lot of their courses are 9,000 level. But some of those students are in some mainstream classes throughout the day. And oftentimes, they're the only student or one or two students from the class that is going to be in person, and the teacher has another 20 students who are remote. And so for those classes, students will be in a centralized location, such as the library. They will receive an assignment. We will have an educator scheduled to that space, at least one at all time. Students will connect remotely to those classes with their headphones. But unlike, being at home navigating those classes alone, the educator in the room will be able to support the student as needed if they are struggling. We'll also have eyes on the students, so if we realize that other interventions are needed, we'll be able to apply those. So in person for the support level classes, connecting remotely with educator support for the mainstream classes. We ask that students who are reporting in school for academic week, again, this is just students we reached out to that we recommended and they accepted. You need to bring headphones to school, and you need to bring your school issued laptop if you were given one. So if you signed out a laptop and you're now coming to school for academic week, that laptop needs to come with you when you're in for academic week. And we will continue to assess the logistics and student needs regarding this plan as we go throughout the year. This is how we're starting it out, and we'll see if anything needs to change. And so more information to go just to those families soon. And then, okay, I thought my next slide was about 100% remote students, but it must be later, so I'll talk about that when it comes up. So in terms of absences, switching gears a little bit, so all the absence policies in our student handbook still apply, but in the supplement to the student handbook, there are a few changes. So one is just that if a student is going to be absent, the parent must still call and notify us regardless of whether it's an in-person or remote week. So if your student is going to be absent for remote instruction, still call the dean's office like you normally would, let us know so that the teacher of record isn't worried that something's wrong with the student not being connected that day. And then if a student is absent due to any of the reasons listed below, we will consider that absence validated and marked as excused. In some instances, medical documentation may be required, but in these instances, we're not going to typically require what we usually do, which is a doctor's note saying you were in the office that day, because with COVID, it's a little different. So the following will be validated and marked as excused. pending it might need additional documentation. So if a student is required to quarantine because they were confirmed to a confirmed case, they will be validated excused absence if they're exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms, and in that case, they'll need clearance in relation to that chart I showed you to return to school. If a student tests positive for COVID-19, if a student falls into one of the above categories on a day they are scheduled for remote instruction and they feel healthy enough to participate remotely, they will be marked present for that day. So let me just explain that again. So if a student is sick and out for any of the 3 reasons above, they will be marked absent and excused. But if it happens to fall on an academic week when they're connecting remotely and they feel well enough to participate, they'll just be marked present. So parents will just have to communicate with us about what's going on with students on that day. And where I said add in new exceptions related to COVID symptoms, quarantine, and potential exposure, I'm realizing I meant to link in again the chart that I showed you earlier. And so that's all that's referring to about when they can come back related to testing. So tardies and dismissals. So students will be considered tardy for the day after 7:50, both from remote and in person. Attendance will be taken each period during remote learning, and tardy students will be reported to the dean. That's what we also do if students are tardy in school for in person. On days that our students are learning remotely, parents must call in or email dismissal information at the start of the day to Heather Tate in the dean's office at this phone number or email. Right now, typically for in-person days, students bring in a dismissal note. Well, that's not going to be possible on that day for remote students. So you either have to call or email Heather Tate to let them know the student's going to be dismissed and exiting the remote day at some point. Dismissal notes and any related documentation can be submitted electronically, or if you call it in, you can and want to send a hard copy the next time the student is in school, that is fine as well. And documentation to excuse tardies, if it's a tardy that requires an excuse because it's after 9:15, those can also be submitted to Ms. Tate. So all those items can still continue to go through the dean's office for remote students as well. And the same policies for in-person are in the student handbook for in-person weeks. So there were some questions about students' IDs, lanyards, and I'm also going to talk about passes here. So all students will be issued school IDs, and they will be expected to have them while at school or attending school events. And they will be expect them to bring to the cafeteria to purchase lunches. We're using a cashless lunch system. We've sent out a few communications about that. And so that just reduces the exchange of cash and then students touching food. So we're going to ask that people have those accounts set up. Students will be given school lanyards to attach their IDs. We just feel like they have less of a chance of losing them. But we will not be enforcing the rule to wear lanyards and IDs during this time under COVID, just because it's not a good time to be giving out shared temporary IDs. Students are in the shop all day. They're not passing through the halls. And so that rule will still give them to students, but it won't be required. And then students typically have to use their agenda books we give them as their passes, but we do not want students and staff like handing those back and forth for sign off. So staff will provide students with one-time paper passes to go anywhere that they need to go for an approved reason. And with that, I'm going to talk about the procedures to leave shop or class. So students will only be given passes to leave their classrooms or shops for approved reasons. So some examples might be if your shop does not have a bathroom in the shop, then you will have to give a pass to leave the shop to go to the bathroom. If you need to go to the co-op office to submit co-op paperwork, if you need to meet with your guidance counselor about something, the dean about something. So to the extent possible, students will be expected to remain in their assigned shop areas to limit the interaction of students, but we recognize there are times they'll have to go to these other areas. So if a student makes a reasonable request to go somewhere for a valid reason, by valid reason, like a student can't be like, oh, can I go to HVAC right now? You know, if their friend is in HVAC, that's going to be shot down. But if it's a valid reason, they can't just be sent because those office areas are much smaller. They have to first call down and make sure that office or area has room to receive the student at that time. You know, if your guidance counselor is already meeting with someone, you can't also be in the office. So just expect that there may be a lag time there. Obviously, if a student is in crisis or if there's an emergency, we're not going to wait until someone says we can bring the student somewhere. Any emergency or crisis procedure will obviously be addressed immediately. I just want students to anticipate a more controlled situation if there are other places that you need to go for the purposes of health and safety. All right, so food and beverage. So you should anticipate that break during shop week is canceled indefinitely. For ninth graders who don't know what I'm talking about, traditionally for 15 minutes in the morning, sort of model the workday. In shop, we've had a break where students can have a snack and a drink in shop. We are only allowing food and beverage in the CAF. We cannot support that in the shops, just huge safety concern, cleaning concerns. That will be canceled. Students can only eat in the CAF at lunch in accordance with the process outlined in section 212, page 6 of the supplement to the student handbook, which there was a link to on the third slide. And instead of reading that to you, you can read it yourselves. And students may drink water during the day following the process outlined in section 2-12, also page 6 of the supplement to the student handbook. So those I highly encourage you in the whole supplement to read. So just about bathroom assignments and use. So students may not congregate in multi-stall bathrooms at any time. There's no hanging out in the bathrooms. You go, you do what you're there for. You wash your hands and then you leave. And students must use the bathrooms in their shops, in all shops that have bathrooms. And then students must use designated bathrooms based on the locations of their shops or classes, attending academic classes, or when they are in shops that do not have bathrooms. And you'll be notified of those in your respective shops or classrooms when you report to school. And students must comply with the occupancy limit on the doors of all multi-stall bathrooms. So for instance, there may be multi-stall bathrooms that have 3 stalls, but the sign on the door will likely say limit 2 students. We ask that you wait outside just to not have too many people in that confined space at once. And students are expected to wash their hands thoroughly for at least 20 seconds before exiting the bathroom because hand washing and sanitizing is the name of the game. So switching gears again here. So some questions were in the chat about after school, extra help, and late buses. So 320 late buses will be available Mondays through Thursdays for students who stay after for extra help only. We'll talk in a later slide about after school activities, but students can't stay after for any reason other than extra help due to a limited capacity of 60 students on the late buses. At this time, the 540 late bus is not available. And so there are 3 late buses. They're listed out the communities, how they're broken down. If the demand increases, we may require students to sign up advance for the late bus when they need to stay after. So we're going to be monitoring at the start, how many students are using the late bus every day. And then if it gets approaching that 60, we're going to implement a sign-up process. Students must remain with their teacher, or if they wrap up with their teacher before 3:20, then report to the cafeteria, which will be supervised while waiting for a late bus, or if a student, a couple parents like, I can't get to the school till 2:20, for example, while waiting to be picked up, we ask that you only delay pickup in the cases where it's absolutely necessary, just because we only have limited capacity of where to keep students after the school day ends. But we will have people supervising those areas. We will have someone supervising the area where students line up for and get on the late bus for 3:20. And so in terms of extra help, all staff will be available after school at least 2 times per week for extra help. All will be available remotely, and many will be available in person. Probably most will be available in person, but we do have some staff who can only connect remotely. And students must communicate with their teachers in advance, so the teachers know when the students plan to stay so that they can be available, and also to, control how many students are going to be in one area at any given time. And so it may be the case that, well, in most cases, you would likely be staying after school for academic help on your shop week, right? Because that's when you're going to be in the building. So just communicating with your teachers so that they know to expect that. So building visitors, so we are not allowing outside visitors or volunteers of any kind to access the building, just to limit who is in our space and interacting with folks. So there may be service providers for the purpose of providing special education services at the advanced authorization of our Director of Support Services, Jeff Albert. There may be service providers addressing issues in the building for our assistant superintendent or business manager. We obviously have the folks who drop off food to the cafeteria and the culinary area, but they don't actually come into the school. They just go to the loading docks. And then any other visitors must be authorized in advance by myself or Dr. Jackson, and that'll only be essential visitors. So that as parents and guardians, you should expect any meetings you may need to have at any time with teachers or a team through the special education department for the foreseeable future. Those are going to be conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. And any visitor who does come and approve has to come to the main office where they will be screened and logged in. So hopefully some parents have been asking, other people are going to be in the building. You can rest assured this is going to be a tightly controlled environment. So discipline, so this is the line that's in the student handbook, and it basically just says, that if students don't comply with the rules and expectations, whether it's in the supplement of the handbook or the student handbook, that can result in disciplinary action. I want to say a couple things about this. Our intention is not to say, oh, little Johnny's mask slipped off under his nose, and we had to say, hey, John, pull it up over your nose. He's getting suspended or he's getting this. If that accidentally happens and the teacher's like, hey, you gotta pull your mask up, the student does, not an issue. If a student refuses to wear a mask or is being, always like taking it off and constantly having told to be put back on, it's not an accident, it's happening all the time. That is a health and safety risk to everyone else in this school community. And that situation may, in many cases, will result in discipline because the student can't just be refusing to wear a mask because they don't want to. Do I anticipate that to be a typical or even somewhat frequent situation? No. I think that we have a group of students in this school that is excited about vocational education, wants to be here, and wants to model what the workforce expects for them. And so I don't expect this to be an issue, but it does have to be shared. And so when you read that line, I just don't want you to walk away thinking, wow, they're going to just try and like stick it to the kids with these rules. That's not it at all. But at the end of the day, health and safety has to be a priority for us. So it could result in this option. So just to make you aware. Co-op, it's another piece in the student handbook supplement. Seniors can continue to access those opportunities. Information has been set at home. It has to be in accordance with the new guidelines that are outlined. I think the biggest takeaway, seniors, is that you may not know this because for those of you who haven't been out on co-op in the past, but in the past, it's been a pretty quick turnaround, a day or so from when you get your paperwork in. But now the extra level of visitation and screening of those sites may take at least a week in some circumstances from when paperwork is completed to when we can say, yes, this is a safe job site for you to go to. It is our priority to get those done as fast as we can, but just want you to anticipate in advance, it might take a little bit longer. So some questions came in about clubs and activities I saw. So most clubs and activities will be offered at the start of the year. Some are not possible to offer in person at this time, and so those won't happen. We will, once school is underway, get information out about clubs and activities, but right now they're going to all start out remote, just because we have to assess the use and capacity of late buses before we say students can stay on campus for activities and be bused home for them. So that'll be something that progresses through the year, but similar to athletics, we realize many of our clubs and activities are essential pieces of feeling part of the Shawshene community, and our staff are willing to offer them remotely for the ones that it's possible. So athletics, I don't want to be redundant. I know that Dr. Jackson had sent out the update about our plan for fall athletics. I know there have been some questions around how to make sure students are signed up and tryouts and everything else. All the information is on the Shawshene Athletics website, including the link to sign up for Family ID and get physicals in, which you do need to do if you haven't already. So if you are interested in athletics, please make sure you visit that website. Just a couple other random handbook changes that didn't come up throughout this. Students, if you did not get a parking pass yet, and you can get one this year regardless of grade level because we have the week split, you can still email Ms. Tobin to get a student parking pass. If you're not going to be getting your license for another month or for 3 months, that's fine. As soon as you have it and all the registration materials, you can apply for a parking pass at that time. So it's not that if you didn't get in August, you never can. Just from this point moving forward, email Ms. Tobin. I mentioned lockers earlier, and then someone asked me about field trips the other day. We're going to just suspend field trips until further notice, until we can assess what that might look like under the new situation we have. And then I apologize because the slide on 100% remote instruction, I must have accidentally deleted. But as I mentioned earlier in the slide, we have about 24 students. So it probably doesn't impact most people on this session right now, but about 24 students who are 100% remote, which means they are remote for vocational week. You will be getting information by Monday about what the first couple weeks will look like. We will have all students who are 100% remote will end up be doing courses using Edgenuity because we just don't have the vocational staff to be doing remote and in person. And it's the best option to get students, and many vocational environments we obviously can't fully replicate. And I know we shared that with you when we offered the opportunity for 100% remote. So we have identified Edgenuity courses that align with the different shop areas. Edgenuity, as you can imagine, is being slammed with requests, and they're moving very fast. It's going to be a couple weeks before they have our courses fully set up. There will be Edgenuity instructors to support the students through that. We will have people designated here for students to check in with. And so more information to come on that. But in the meantime, over the first couple weeks, there will be work from the shops for students to do to start off the year. So you will be hearing from the school if you are one of those 24 students. So don't worry about that. We haven't forgotten you. And they will have details about your schedule because your situation looks a little different than obviously the remote academic week. Then before I turn back to questions, my last slide is just a reminder because I know there are a lot of questions around it. Next week is a week 2, our first week of school. 10th and 12th will be at home for academics. 9 and 11 will be here for shop. And then we will switch the week after with seniors in co-op only coming in on Monday of that week. At this time, I'm going to return to our chat box. If you give me a moment here. All right. So student asks, how will I know where my bus stop is? If you go to that link for the bus schedules, and if you even just Google Shawshene bus, that website will come up and those bus stops have been posted. And you're just going to pick the stop that is closest to where you live and makes the most sense for you to get to. So will students ever be able to go into school for academic week? Not until the regulations change. We just can't fit any more students in the school at this point safely and keep them at the appropriate distance apart. But as soon as it becomes safe to do so, I know it will be a priority for many of us to get them in here. Based off the social distance rules, how many people will you be able to talk to at lunch? That's a great question. So the way the tables are set up, you'll see when you come in, sort of at like one table, there's maybe on some of them, there's like a person at each end, and then one in the middle on the other side to create like the 6-foot triangle. At other tables, it's just like a person at each end, depending on how long they are. So I imagine kind of like probably one person in each direction and maybe like one person in front of you. But most of the folks are facing in the same direction. So not a ton of people, but there'll be like almost a third of the usual students in the CAF, so it'll be much quieter than usual as well. I realize that this is not the social time that students enjoy, but it is how we are going to be in compliance with the 6-foot rule. So, yep, during remote learning, the lunch schedule will be that first lunch. So class will end at 10:43, and then your next class will start at 11:08. Yeah, so anytime a student is in the building, they have the option of taking the bus. So someone asked if there would be no Alice drills this year. We will likely still have to do fire and Alice drills, but Alice drills will not be started right at the start of the school year. We need to get things underway and figure out how to do those safely. And like always, we never have surprise Alice drills. So students and parents will be made aware of those in advance. So students can bring water, but snacks cannot be eaten anywhere other than the cafeteria. So can parents view their children's work in Microsoft like you could in Google? I'm not familiar with the Google just because I've always worked with Microsoft here. I am going to follow up with our ed tech department. They have talked about a way to get parents that access at that point. And the expectation of staff is still that they will be updating grades in Aspen within an every 2-week period as well. Just some parents had asked about that the other day. So when will students get their ID? They will get them when they're in school. So we have to print out schoolwork at home. So no, that is not the expectation. The majority of what you do remotely will be submitted through Microsoft Teams. It'll be submitted electronically, and your teachers will set that up with you. And then some teachers, when the first week students in school, will be sending hard copy materials home, and some teachers may have like packets for you to work off at home depending on the class. But teachers have been told they can't expect you to have to print things. So most of what you do will be electronic. Can you switch between the bus you take home and the bus you take to school? Yeah, we do have some students who need to do that. You know, maybe in the morning you're coming from one parent's house, in the afternoon you're going to another. So yes, that is something some students have to do. So someone's asking if it's okay if they get in the same car with someone when they go home. We are not going through and checking who's driving with who to school. I would, that's not something that we can sort of police and maintain. But I would just ask all students to be really careful about, social distancing and keeping your circles small, just as part of reducing the transmission to the extent you can. But we will not be checking cars. So someone's asking how late students would be if they have to wait for the buses to come back. We can't predict that at this point, just because it would depend on, how soon in the run they ran out of space, how far away those stops are. So a lot of this, I know it's not a great answer, but we won't have any idea until we see it in action. Then the school will sort of reassess based on what happens if that occurs. If an incoming ninth grader is on the wait list, how will they experience shops they missed due to being accepted late? So when a ninth grader comes in late, they is accepted later in the year, they just explore fewer shops, and an exploratory schedule will be set up for those students. So if a student misses class due to illness, they get a 0 for the day's work. So similar to our policies, in a normal school year, if a student is absent, they have time to make up the work for that class afterwards. So that would still apply. There's not a supply list. If there are any specific supplies for any class or shop, teachers will let students know that at the start of school. So what do they do when remote and the internet goes out? With so many people working and going to school remote, this may be a bandwidth issue perhaps. Yeah, some students, parents have brought up, I live in this area of, Billerica where we lose power all the time. Obviously, if there are power outages or internet outages, we can't penalize students for that. So in those extenuating circumstances, obviously, we'll be accommodating. We recognize that that's something that could happen anywhere. Freshmen will receive their IDs when they are in school. So this question is about attendance. Yes, it will be taken every period of the day on academic week. And shop is just taken at the start of the day because they're in the same shop all day. So we will be distributing badges to students when they come to school at the start of the week. So if you're leaving on a bus after school, how that work with buses that need to go out multiple times. So if any buses fill and they have to make multiple runs, we will keep those students in the building between the cafeteria and the gym until the buses are able to return. Hopefully, we can fit all the students on the buses who need them, but we won't know that until we see it tomorrow. This question is about co-op for juniors at the end of the year. So we have made no decisions beyond the fall. So at this moment, we haven't made any changes to junior co-op. So for those of you who don't know, juniors who are eligible may go out Q4. Any changes to that would be based on any changes with guidance at that time. But at the moment, nothing has been said from the state about what to do Q4 for juniors. So when we get closer, we'd have an answer. But I think it's safe to act like you're working toward that throughout the year as a junior, because you do want to be in a place where you remain eligible. Yeah, so we have tried to accommodate students' top 3 shops for 9th grade in the beginning of the year to the extent possible. And it has definitely been hard to do just with the number of students requesting certain shops and the limits on how many students we can have in shops each week. And we have, it's a great thing, but we have a very large freshman class this year. And so, we'll do our best to try and work with that. You can certainly talk to your guidance counselor if you have a concern, and I would reach out about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Great question. So a student says he signed up to take the bus. Can he be driven time to time, or does he have to take the bus? Absolutely, you can be driven time to time. No one's gonna, check and fault you for not taking the bus on a certain day, but I appreciate you being so thoughtful about that. So students don't have to bring their personal laptops to school, just if they were issued a Shawsheen laptop. So if a student loses power during a storm, I would call the dean's office and let them know, because they won't be able to attend remote learning. And so think of it that way, like they're going to essentially be absent that day. So I'll call the dean's office and let them know. Great question. And so if there are any issues, I see a lot of questions just about like freshmen getting their accounts set up with their IDs and everything else. If freshmen need to bring cash at the start, or because they don't have that capability yet, they're not going to get in trouble for that. So that is okay. So the addendum to the student handbook is going to be emailed out to everyone, and it will be added to the principal's page of the school website after this session. I'm excited by how many juniors have asked questions about co-op. I'm excited that's something, and I'm dismissing them because I've answered it already, but that's something that I'm excited about. So a lot of students asking if they should bring their personal laptops to school, and you don't have to do that, only the school issued ones. So will the school store be open? Not at the start of the school year, but more to come on that. So I will email out the link to the bus routes. Some questions are coming about that, but if you just Google Shawshene Tech Bus, you'll be able to find those. So someone has asked, what if I have not received an invitation to my remote academic classes? I am a senior. It'll be in there by Monday. Teachers, because we've had to move a couple student rosters around based on students who are remote or in person and whatnot. And so teachers will be adding students to their teams by Monday. So you will have that. So a question has come in about what would cause Shawshene to go remote. And I'm going to only slightly answer that because that would be a Dr. Jackson and school committee decision, not a principal decision. But this question is noting that some districts are deciding based on the green, yellow, and red metrics. And so since we have 5 districts, what would cause us to go into it? DESE has attached us to Bill Ricca as our community since it's our biggest community. So know that that's sort of our district that we're linked with. But I'm not going to comment anymore on that right now. Excellent. So someone's asked if there's a contact tracing plan in place. So if a student or faculty member becomes ill and exposes people, will we be contacted? Absolutely. Our nurse's office will work with the local board of public health, and I will be involved as well. Let's say, for instance, a student in X classroom, we find out that they were confirmed. What we then do is we look at the seating chart, we look at everywhere that student went that day. We talk to the nurse and the board of health about who is considered a close contact, and they define that. And then anyone who was close enough and needs to quarantine or get a test, we will contact and say, hey, you have been exposed to a confirmed case. Here are the things that you need to do. What we won't do is say you were exposed to this person in this environment. But absolutely, we have plans in place for that. And that is something we will move swiftly on if it does occur, which we really hope that it doesn't. This question was asked if students need specific apps for remote learning. They're going to need to log in the Microsoft portal. Some teachers may also utilize some other sources. You know, there are different things on the web that they integrate as part of their classes and have before, but they wouldn't be given anything that they need to download or pay money for. Still getting a lot of co-op questions. Juniors, we have not made plans to co-op yet, and we'll assess that as we get close to quarter 4. But again, glad you're excited. So how will homework go out? So any independent work will be communicated through your teachers in each of your team's classes. So how is gym class going to be accomplished remotely? So there's a health component, which will have much of the traditional pieces of what a health class looks like. And then the gym portion may include a number of activities that you do asynchronously, which means you're not doing in front of the screen. Great. So someone had said when they've used Microsoft Teams in the past, there's the option of muting and kicking out other participant even though they weren't an administrator. So they're asking if students can mute other students or kick them out. We have settings set up in the back end so students can't do that to other students or to the teacher. That's a great question. It was one of the first questions some of our staff had as well. So there may be some homework assigned during academic weeks. I've been talking to staff about it being like, independent work, because all work is homework now, right? So again, there'll be some things that you do while you're interacting with the teacher, and there'll be some that you sort of work on independently. So this is asking about hand sanitizer being highly flammable and precautions taken in shop classes. Yeah, in all environments where there are safety concerns such as that, we have safety protocols in place for things. That's something that our director of vocational programs is very on top of. Oh, I'm just going to thank you for the school doing a nice job with building this system for students. Thank you. That is very kind. The entire staff has been working really diligently, just like we know you all have been at home trying to support students during this time. Agenda books will be issued by the school. Is there any news on the school trip to Italy? I do not have any updates on that at this moment. But the advisor, Mr. Bagney, I imagine will be in touch soon. Sorry, okay, we only have a couple questions left here. I'm just sifting through repeats and new questions. You're a sophomore transferring in. When will you be able to get your schedule and how? I apologize that you haven't gotten it. I'm going to touch base with the guidance department and have someone follow up with transfer students. Thank you for bringing that up. So you should have it by Monday. Absolutely. And if you haven't heard from anyone tomorrow, feel free to call the school, but I'm going to follow up after this to make sure someone gets in touch with you. So yeah, so if you borrowed a laptop, anytime you come to school for academics, you're going to bring that with you. So if a student is out of school remote week because they are sick, are they still expected to log into their classes? Excellent. So if a student is so sick that they can't log into their classes, then they'll just, call us, tell them they're going to be absent. But if a student isn't feeling well and still wants to log in and can do the work, they certainly can, because they wouldn't be in the building to spread things to anyone. So students won't be required to be remote when they're sick, but many may be able to because they're at home and not in the building. So for now, this question is, do students bring school issued laptops during shop weeks? So at the moment, students are only expected to bring school issued laptops during their academic weeks if they are one of the students in for academics. But you might find that in certain shops, they ask people who have laptops to bring them in if that'll help in certain shop settings. But overarchingly, no, you don't need to bring them in during shop week. Excellent. So where will you find the shop that you have to go to? So I'm assuming this is coming from a 9th grade student. You will, if looking at the map doesn't make sense and you don't know where to go, enter any entrance and just ask a staff member when you come in, and we will definitely direct you where you need to go. If something happens to your laptop during the year, can you get another one? Provided we have some available at that time, then certainly. So when can we expect to receive information in regards to setting up lunch accounts? That information has been sent home, and there's been links in the past couple of principals updates. So if you go into any of those, you can see it's under a link. I believe it's a cashless system or cashless lunches, excuse me, in those updates. So someone asked, how do we get their login names for Microsoft? So students in grades 10 through 12 already have their logins for Microsoft. It's the same ones they've been using at school all along, and I encourage you to test them out before Monday. Ninth graders will receive them before they leave school next week, so they will be pulled out of shop and be given all that information. Another great question. So if a student is coming late due to being in an appointment, where should we drop the student to enter the building? Drop them at the main entrance. So are all staff inside the building being required to wear a mask? Yes, they are being required to wear a mask. I'm in my office right now, so I don't have a mask on for this presentation, but everyone is required to wear masks. So if your student doesn't have internet, there are some resources on the EdTech page, but I would encourage you to reach out to the guidance office if you have concerns about your student not having internet, to see how we can help support you with that. So for students who are invited into school for academics, we will be giving them laptops to use during that week, but then they will have to leave them here so we have enough for students reporting to academics for the following week. So the question is every student receiving a school laptop, or just the ones who opted in? So we actually we are not a one-to-one school, so we don't have enough laptops to give to every student. So far we have given them to the students who have opted in. Someone said they're looking at their freshman schedule now, and it's very confusing. There are no times of day. So again, I'll post this presentation and the slide that showed the times of day for each period. You can use that to line up on their schedule the times of day. And then on their academic week, those will be pre-populated for the times of day into their calendars. So students just click on those links and they can get in. Should you wear your shop clothes into school? Excellent question, because some students do like to change into their shop clothes when they get here. Due to limited restroom capacities, students should wear their shop clothes to school to ensure that they're able to be ready on time. So someone asked, how do I know the exact location of the bus pickup, not just the street name? So if the best advice I could give based on that list is to just sort of Google those locations so that you can see where they fall, because the bus schedules list like the different intersections, and you can get a sense of the one that is closest to you. So during remote week, will students have that 4-minute break during a double class? It's going to vary teacher to teacher, because teachers all lessons are going to be some portion of the teacher doing something and some of the students being independent. So it depends on the flow of the lesson with the teacher. We are getting rid of, for in school, there are no any double blocks. There's no like 4-minute hallway break between classes. So I'm looking to see if we have any new questions that haven't been answered. Someone has a question about reading the academic class codes. You can cross-reference those. The program of studies has all the class codes if you want to investigate the right levels of classes. And under the academics tab on the school website is the 2020-21 program of studies. Is the school patio going to be open to use? It is not. So that gorgeous school patio that our masonry students built, only one person can sit safely per table. And I think some of the tables aren't far enough apart. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to allow students out there at lunch. On the first day of school, should students wear the required clothing for their shops? Yes, that would definitely be great for students to do. And yes, the bus routes are the same regardless if a student is 100% in school or hybrid and just in for vocational. Right. That is all of our questions. If you put a question in at the end that I didn't answer, it means I've already answered it a couple times during the session, and I just don't want to keep repeating because I know that folks want to wrap up here. We've been here for about 2 hours, and so please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions or concerns. Again, we will be posting this video online. We will be sending out the presentation, all of the links that have been referred to, and we look forward to welcoming students on Monday. It has definitely been an interesting time to prepare for the opening of school, but everyone here has really pulled together, and we're excited to have kids back. And we all recognize that at the end of next week, there are going to be a couple things we say, hey, we need to do that a little differently, because until you live it, you don't know for sure. So just expect that we're going to assess and adapt as we go. And I hope that everyone has an excellent weekend, and we will see half of you in person on Monday and the rest of you online on Monday. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful night.